where the series is headed.
How's that?
The unknown journey promised at the end of its head-spinning final chapter. I myself have tried my hand at theorizing some predictions for FF7 Rebirth, but in this video I want to take a step back and try to definitively answer exactly why FF7 Remake's creators have seemingly decided to change the story of FF7. I made a video last June with some predictions around FF7 Rebirth. That said, I'm no longer certain about the exact predictions I made in it, but I still largely believe in its overall philosophy. I talked about some of the most popular Zack theories, everything from him saving Aerith to taking over the party after Cloud is lost to the livestream. I concluded with my own theory that Zack wouldn't end up interacting with the main party in Rebirth because the core narrative thrust of FF7 centers on the mystery of Cloud's true backstory. I predicted that Zack would be off on a bit of an unexpected mission that was unrelated to the main party so that he can enter the main events once Cloud had already restored his memories in Part 3. After all, how would the story of FF7 work if Cloud met Zack and found out the truth about his past when his identity crisis is literally how Sephiroth comes to manipulate him throughout the story and enact his ultimate plan? And yes, I still believe that would be important even after the announcement of Crisis Core Reunion, a game that thoroughly spoils the truth of who Zack and Cloud really are. Hell, it spoils it in the damn trailer. I thought maintaining Cloud's confusion about the past was necessary because it seemed the developers were keeping that element of the story intact, both in Remake and in the trailer for Rebirth. Then I played Crisis Core Reunion, a game that Square Enix has heavily marketed to both old fans and first-timers, and I couldn't stand fully by my theory anymore. So it got me really wondering about a bigger and more important question than what's going on with Zack, and a question that I don't think people have really dug into.
All right, so I'm interested to hear how Crisis Core changed your mind.
What the hell is Square doing with the Remake trilogy? Sure, there are millions of theory videos. Some incredibly in-depth dives. It's a me. Given that Crisis Core reveals the truth about Cloud's past, a truth that is treated as a mystery throughout the original game, how could they give that away already? Why destroy that twist? In what way would that improve the story? This isn't me just being precious about a very cool moment. It's the biggest reveal of the original game. Sure, most people know about Aerith's death, but so many don't know the truth about Cloud's past, and for good reason. It's too complicated to be spoiled by a tweet or a simple YouTube thumbnail. And it's still blowing people's minds to this very day.
That thumbnail.
That's what happened!
The two main creative voices leading the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, the producer and overarching creative director, love the livestream sequence where Cloud's past is revealed. If it's such a standout part of the game, how could they spoil it? And for this of all things.
Okay, first of all, this is one of the best first 6 minutes of a video regarding Final Fantasy VII that I've seen in years. I don't know if you'll eventually get Nojima's quote on the live stream sequence too. Nojima is the writer, don't get us wrong. Like, he's the one that, he's even been quoted as saying that he takes pleasure in the fact that he's the one that kind of holds all the strings that connect everything together. He's not on site every day. He's not overseeing production. It's pretty clear sometimes, even in projects as recent as Remake, that, you know, he puts a script out, he has this lore built, and then the scenario and event planners have to coordinate something within that framework. So really, at the end of the day, the people that make the game what it is, like that, you know, like kind of sign off on the final thing, especially with Final Fantasy VII, were Katase and Nomura, you know, more so than Sakaguchi even. So for them to recognize the live stream sequence and Cloud's mind as their favorite, or, you know, the quote unquote center of the story, or the center of Cloud's journey. All right, let's continue. I want to hear what your thoughts on what the crux is, what the crux of Final Fantasy VII Remake is.
The crux of the story hasn't changed, end quote. Number 2, quote, we fashioned the FF7 Remake project such that you finally unravel the mystery of what's going on when you reach the end, end quote. So let's talk about each. What is meant by the, quote, crux of the story hasn't changed? This is a masterclass of deceptive language. For one, story and plot are different things. Put most simply, the story is what a game, movie, or book is about, and the plot is the sequence of events that helps you tell that story. Let's use Jurassic Park as an example.
Okay. Man, the Jurassic Park theme song has pervaded so much of my life.
Earth dying in the ancient city, Cloud regaining his memory in the life stream stopping Meteor, Kate sacrificing himself. Okay, I'm kidding on the last one. We need to put those plot points to bed. If these major plot points were to remain intact, there is very little reason for them to have the party defeat Destiny and lead us on an unknown journey. At least one of those major plot points is bound to dramatically change, if not all of them.
Absolutely.
In fact, let's take a look at each through the lens of plot versus story. Aerith's death. I think this is part of the core story, not just a plot point. Dealing with loss is a major theme of the story for all the characters, especially for Cloud, the life stream stopping Meteor. If this were to still happen, it would mean the culmination of the story is the same. Cloud regaining his memory. And here is where things get tricky. The release of Crisis Core Reunion almost certainly puts the live stream sequence with Cloud and Tifa in jeopardy. As cool of a sequence as it is, and as much as the developers have sung its praises for over 20 years, what makes it special is that it is the big reveal of the game's story. You learn the truth that Cloud has been obscuring, and the answer to the mystery that has hung over the journey the entire time, even leading to the main character betraying the rest of the party in the Northern Crater. But Crisis Core Reunion completely spoils that reveal. It outright tells everyone that it is actually Zack who traveled to Nibelheim as Sephiroth's partner, not Cloud. Hell, as I mentioned earlier, they show that in the trailer for the game, and they've openly told new fans to play Crisis Core Reunion so they're caught up with Zack's backstory in Rebirth. They've even said those new fans could start their remake journey with Rebirth. How could they rob people of that surprise? On the surface, it feels much more than a plot point. It feels structural to the game's story. That's when I thought about the developer's quote one more time. Quote, "The crux of the story hasn't changed. I've already established that there is a difference between plot and story. So what is the story of FF7? What is the FF7 equivalent to Jurassic Park's story about a group of scientists confronting and surviving the world's greatest and most dangerous scientific achievement? I don't know about you, but I had a hard time trying to come up with as simple of an answer. My mind quickly races to major plot points, and most summations either feel far too long and meandering, or are too short while leaving out a lot of what makes Final Fantasy VII truly special.
I agree. It's very hard to summarize.
Wikipedia is a blend of both. Quote, "The game's story follows Cloud Strife, a mercenary who joins an eco-terrorist organization to top a world-controlling megacorporation from using the planet's life essence as an energy source. Events send Cloud and his allies in pursuit of Sephiroth, a former member of the corporation who seeks to destroy the planet." That may be the premise, but not really what the whole story is. So I turn to the game's box, which is wildly abstract. Quote, "What begins as a rebellion against an evil corporation becomes much more, and what erupts goes beyond imagination." End quote. That's a bit closer, but more of a tease. So I looked for the instruction book, but it had no summary and just a rundown of characters. Even my own attempts to summarize the story leave me wanting. And don't worry, I'll spare you those attempts. In fact, one of my best friends asked me once to explain why FF7 meant so much to me. He just couldn't get it based on only playing the demo. And it led to a 3-hour conversation where I took him through every major plot point.
Pretty
To my
standard
surprise, it didn't bore
experience.
him. It actually fascinated him. There was so much more richness than he expected, but a painstaking 3-hour run-through doesn't meet the Jurassic Park criteria. That said, there is one description of the game's story that I think comes closest, and it comes from the game's quote-unquote official introduction. Side note, I'm not sure where this introduction lives, but it's been documented in multiple places. This is technically the entire thing, but I'll focus on the final paragraph. Quote, "Now a small rebel group emanating from the slums must quell the various dangers toward the innocent, and one mercenary for hire must look amidst the lies and deception and find the man he is within." For me, that story summary unlocked what I believe to be the truth. Let's read a part of it one more time. Quote, "One mercenary for hire must look amidst the lies and deception and find the man he is within." End quote. If I were held at gunpoint and asked to summarize what I believe FF7's story to be, it would be that. I might add something like, "in an attempt to save the world," but it would otherwise summarize what the story is all about. But remember, the developers didn't say the story hasn't changed. They said the crux of the story hasn't changed. That's when I had an epiphany. The clouds parted, the sun shone down on me, the I was on at the time fully kicked in, and I could finally see clearly why the developers would both tease Cloud's unreliable, mysterious memories of the past, while simultaneously revealing the truth of that past via Crisis Core Reunion. Visiting that official story summary one last time, there is one part in particular that stands out after this epiphany. Quote, "And one mercenary for hire must look amidst the lies and deception and find the man he is within." End quote.
Right.
Lies and deception. What could better represent the crux of the story? Not the entire story, but the quote-unquote crux of the story, better than lies and deception.
This is
When
so
watching the
good,
reveal trailer for
subtext.
Rebirth, it's dripping with this idea of lies and deception. What is fact and what is fiction, and what is Sephiroth's endgame? Even with all of the crazy VO lines like Tifa asking if someone is implying she died, these lines hinting at a big mystery were reassuring to me as someone who assumed the developers were throwing away the mysteries of the original game. That's because a defining element of FF7's story is unraveling the mysteries behind the lies and deceptions built into the very structure of the story, an element so strong that it's still blowing minds to this day. It's no small part of the story either. One of the building blocks of this video was coming to the realization that the truth of Cloud's past will no longer be the big reveal of the game, especially after having it spoiled by both Hojo and Crisis Core Reunion.
Right.
After sitting with that realization for a while, it was so clear as if to seem obvious. But they weren't just giving away that mystery, they were replacing it with another, the truth about Zack and the timeline madness teased at the end of Remake. But even as I let that sink in, a bigger problem presented itself. Giving up Cloud's mystery removes a foundational element that drives the majority of FF7's story. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the developers. You are remaking a game where 80% of the remaining story centers around a mystery that at least half the player base knows in and out. I think most fans wouldn't have a problem with having that story faithfully retold, but it's clear that it wouldn't be creatively fulfilling to the developers. Once again, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the creators. If we're gonna go out and try to figure out what they're doing in this game, let's put ourselves in their shoes. You are working with an original story that is propelled by a large mystery. Nearly 80% of what's left centers around that mystery. At least half of the people playing this remake trilogy will either be fans of the original or be new FF7 fans who decide to play the OG while waiting for parts 2 and 3. You personally and creatively feel like any lack of mystery would be unsatisfying for fans who've clamored for a remake for 2 decades, based on your own experience with remakes.
That's right.
When you take all of that into account, it appears that FF7 is undergoing a major change in order to preserve that sense of mystery and surprise that sits at the heart of the story experience. In the original FF7, the story was propelled by Cloud's role as an unreliable narrator. Not only did his unreliable recollection of the past cause confusion for us as players, but it directly impacted the journey of the party and their
It's a fantastic point.
It impacted all players as much as it did the characters in the story. In FF7 Remake, Cloud's role of being the unreliable narrator is being supplanted by this unreliable world, something that can once again impact not only the journey of the characters, but also the journey of all players, not just those who've never played FF7. Whether you play the original or not, everyone who played Remake all asked very similar questions throughout. What the fuck are all these plot ghosts? Why is Cloud seeing flashes of other events? Why is Midgar being domed off by the Whispers? Why are we killing Fate? What does Sephiroth mean by 7 seconds till he ends? Why is there even a different dog on the chips now? All of these questions are coming from the same kind of uncertainty about what's going on that was felt throughout all of our first playthroughs of Final Fantasy VII. It sits at the heart of the story experience that the remake trilogy is trying to create. Number 1, an unreliable narrative source remaining as the quote-unquote crux of the story, but this time coming from the truth about the world itself rather than just the truth about our main protagonist. Number 2, a mystery powered by that unreliable narrative source that fits their ambition to, quote, fashion the FF7 Remake project such that you finally unravel the mystery of what's going on when you reach the end. So if you think FF7 Rebirth will give you some answers, expect the opposite. The truth about Cloud's
Completely
past
agree.
isn't revealed until the third act of the original FF7, and so I believe the truth about whatever is going on with the world won't be revealed until the third game in this trilogy.
Completely
What
agree.
they're cooking up may not be what we want or expect, but it's aiming to make us all say, holy shit, in the same way that the original game did once its original mystery was revealed. That's what they're trying to do. That same feeling that we all had during the live stream sequence, the sequence that we think may be going away, or could be going away as we know it. That is the feeling they are trying to replicate for everyone who plays this game, whether you know the original game or you don't.
Sure.
But before you get too frightened about what that can mean, let's make sure I don't just cherry pick quotes. Let's go back to one of the quotes I started to read earlier and finish it. As a reminder, this is the one where Nomura talked about how reconfirming the same plot points
I was wondering
would
if you would do
deliver
this.
a quote-unquote paltry payoff, where players say to themselves, yeah, I already know all this. Quote, that said, if the story were to change entirely and become something completely different, it would lack any significance. The challenge we've undertaken with this project is introducing new mysteries without straying from the original. End quote. On the surface, this quote feels contradictory to nearly everything I've said in this video, and the developers themselves have said in almost every quote I've referenced. And that's where comparisons to the anime Evangelion come in handy.
Oh, wow.
The 90s Evangelion anime. But the way the remake devs have repeatedly said it's not changing that much makes me feel that they won't go quite as far as Evangelion.
I don't think so
For
either.
example, if they really follow the Evangelion model, then the meteor would hit the planet at the end of Rebirth. I don't see something as dramatic as that happening, but I do think the Evangelion rebuild movies do show that you can change major plot points while still telling largely the same story and character journey. I think that story and this whole video is the answer to the question of why is FF7 Remake changing things? They want to truly retain that unreliable narrative core that led to a huge reveal that knocked us all on our asses the first time we played this game. The real question now is, can they pull it off? After all, a revelation this mind-blowing only comes once in a generation, and I hope whatever Nomura, Kitase, and the team have in store for us is even half as good.
I would say that the crux of Final Fantasy VII being the unreliable narration is at least partially true and partially how I conceptualize it. I do think that when I heard that the crux wouldn't change, my brain went to the same spot, the live stream sequence, and but the only little, I think, variance in the way that I perceive the story of Final Fantasy VII is not that it's not the reveal, it's not the unreliable narration, it's not the lies and deception part is most important. Like it is part of the crux. I'm not saying that it isn't a component of the crux, but I do think that the official intro that you read, looking through the lies and deception to find oneself, to find himself, that is, I think if this is to remain Final Fantasy VII, it still needs to be about the journey Cloud takes to find himself. And I think that the resolution of the live stream sequence is more the crux than the specifics of the mystery. And I think you probably agree that for them to say that the crux is the same, but kind of undercut the lies that Cloud told us by showing Crisis Core first, the only way that isn't disingenuous is if the crux is more about the discovery and not about the journey. But, the lies and deception part are obviously going to be critical. I actually do think that whatever they end up doing in part 3 with the live stream sequence, with the reveal, will have to at least mirror some of the aesthetic choices, mirror some of the stylistic choices of that scene. And I really do think that the only way it works is still in Cloud's mind. But, the unreliable world stuff could come into play still. I really like the way you conceptualize that the difference is an unreliable narrator versus an unreliable world. I think that's a fantastic way of saying it. And I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I can't recommend this video enough. You did a great job editing too. Good music choices. As far as the comparison to Ava, I think it's hard to find anything in media that is doing what Remake is doing. Like there's a little bit of safety in comparison, like, oh, like this is just off the rails. You can't do that. Well, somebody already did. There's a little bit of you get a little bit of clout by taking a well-worn path. I would say that the way that Ava rebuilt the story is the closest I can think of to Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake. But I think that a runner-up will probably come from Trigun Stampede. Into Trigun Stampede, and included an origin story, and sort of reworked the story to it flowed completely different, but it's still so undeniably Trigun. In Final Fantasy VII is still a character of it, and so I don't think that we're going to see I think we'll see the world change, but I don't think we'll see like a whole new world. That is a core of the story, is destroying the planet is bad. And you could get real avant-garde and destroy the planet, but anything that you do to tell a story about the characters after the planet is destroyed really undercuts that core. And so, I'm not saying that the past won't change or there won't be time bullshit. I think it's how they nail, the crux, how they nail Cloud becoming who he is or finding who he is. And can they do that different? Or I think a better way to look at it for me is that, can they do it better? Can we learn more about Cloud in terms of like the pacing? And I really agree with this wholeheartedly. We're going to be kicking the can of the mysteries to the third part. Like, it is financially critical that they do that, as a matter of fact. Like, if they want the third copy to sell, the third title to sell, like, they need to solve a mystery. So there will definitely be an extension of mystery. However, I do think Nomura was pretty clear that by the end of Rebirth, we would know what was at least going on with Zack. So I do think that at least that mystery will have enough conclusion that we're not going to feel like we got nothing, I think Zack and his fate will be understood. Whatever mechanical link he has to Rebirth, whatever's happening at the end of Remake, that mystery will be solved. I think the three central characters of Rebirth will be Zack, Cloud, and Sephiroth. I know that this is a time for a lot of these other characters to shine, and new characters like Vincent and Sid, and for us to get more of a look at Tifa and even Aerith, but I do think that there's some real heavy coding going on with the anniversary logos. The central mystery of Final Fantasy VII Remake is just Zack. I think that all of the new mysteries are tied together. Like the Zack thing, Zack surviving has a connection to Aerith's new connection to the future, and Aerith's sense that the world is unreliable, as you said. And then that relates to Mystery Sephiroth somehow. Like, they're all drawing off of a central mechanic. Like, that is all, those things aren't going to resolve themselves. They're going to resolve each other. Instead of them resolving each other, we do have to acknowledge that we're doing algebra, right? That there is a missing component of the mystery that will probably be revealed next game. And then, as we begin to understand the core mystery at the end of Rebirth, all of them will coalesce and solve each other in part 3. That's the only way this is going to work. And I think the best place to resolve all of them, in Cloud's mind, that sounds scary. That sounds like Kingdom Hearts. That sounds like Is the World Memories. And I do think that the concrete ending of the rebuild, Evangelion rebuild, I do think that a lot of us want and are hoping something that's not esoteric, but I don't think we'll really, like, nothing can really tell us if it's going to be grounded mysteries or just nonsense. The thing about Crisis Core Reunion is that they redid all the voice lines for consistency. That is in English. That is the one thing that makes me really think that it mattered to them to release it now. That it wasn't a just gun to their head thing. Because, something that I think people don't understand about Crisis Core Union is that it's actually built on a more advanced... Imagine if they called Part 3 Reunion anyways. Sector 6 thinks that that's still a possibility. I think that would be the worst marketing decision that they can make. I think it's really clear. You go remake, rebirth, afterbirth. I could be wrong. Requiem is like in 2, and it would really feed into the sense of dread that the end of part 2 will have. So something being called Rebirth and then having a negative ending is especially when you consider that rebirth and reverse are the same word in Japanese, like they sound the same. And so the idea of something that's generally considered like a positive thing ending the way that we know a middle part of a trilogy has to end, which is like terribly, like shit's gonna be dark. That is part 2 of a trilogy 101. And I don't see them subverting that trope because it's definitely not a broken trope. And because Katase was like, hey, you guys like trilogies? Second parts are always dark, so, and often the best ones. Calling it Rebirth and then having it have a dark ending. I think there's something interesting that matches Requiem, whereas Requiem will sound foreboding, but probably end in a way that bodes well for the future of something. My favorite video of the year. Yeah, I'm hoping that you guys are all going to subscribe to Subtext.